All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Let's just jump right into it. I did want to start off with Verzuz because I didn't get a chance to talk about it earlier in the week, but overall, of course, I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to watch. And of course, this was with Earth, Wind & Fire and the Isley brothers. And, it was like 4 hours and some change, too. So, the crazy part is, even after the 4 hours and the wardrobe change and Steve Harvey and his 50 stories, because, he had the one story about him riding a bike 3 miles in the snow to get to the girl's house to give her a letter. And then it wasn't really a letter. It was the Earth, Wind & Fire lyrics. And that was the sweetest thing anybody could have ever done for her. And, story after story. But the crazy part is, even after all of that time, they still didn't even get to feature a lot of their music because both groups just have that much material. That's one of the things I was trying to say on the last video as well. I think some people took it the wrong way, like I was coming after one group. I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. But, with the Isley brothers, again, them coming out in the mid-50s and having like a 15-year head start before Earth, Wind & Fire, they have almost twice as many singles as Earth, Wind & Fire. So, of course, they couldn't feature all of theirs. And then with Earth, Wind & Fire, they have such a huge catalog. They still couldn't feature all their stuff either. To be honest, both groups could have done their own solo verses and it would have still been 4 hours. Like, that's how dope it is when you look at what both groups were able to contribute to music. Like, it's amazing to see just the work, the body of work that was presented to us and that we still celebrate today, and that we hear in so many samples and hear in so many references and commercials. And of course, a lot of these songs still get parties going. And what I enjoyed about it was I felt like my whole building was watching this at the same time. It would be so funny, like, I don't know, Earth, Wind & Fire would play a song and I'd hear the people above me start stomping, and I'm like, oh, yep, they're watching it. And then, Isley brothers would do something and the other person on the other side, I can hear them banging the wall, and you hear people clapping and stomping, yeah, and singing, and you can hear the person above you sliding on the floor dancing. It reminded me of, I think I told this, like, when I went to Essence Fest one time, like, when we were on the plane, the funniest thing was, everybody on the plane was going to Essence, and so it was like the whole plane was having one big giant conversation. It was the dopest thing ever. Like, when I tell you I love black folks, because when we get excited about something, it was so funny because, like, on the plane, it's just all these people on here, and folks done got a good drink or two, and so, everybody's on there just laughing and I'm just like, okay, that's what Verzuz felt like for me last night. I kind of wish, or not last night, but earlier in the week, I kind of wish I could have been at my mom's house to watch it, but she lives in another state. And then, to be honest, it did make me sad, too, because it made me think of my father, because a lot of those songs are songs that, he would play when we would go on our road trips. And this is back when you just bought whole CDs. Wasn't no playlist. You played the whole CD. So, gave me some memories. And again, even when you talk about the conversation of sampling, just there were so many songs that, are sampled in R&B and hip-hop and even pop, that reference a lot of the work that Earth, Wind & Fire and the Isley brothers have done. And even just not them, but even when you think of like Maze and Frankie Beverly, Zapp and Roger, or even some of the Angela Winbush productions. And shout out to her as well, because I think sometimes we don't gas her up for her productions. A lot of those early 80s Isley brother tunes were a lot of her work. She's definitely one that I think people don't give credit to as far as a black woman producer and just her contributions to music, because she's definitely a legend in the making. Not even in the making, but a legend in the flesh at the moment is what I meant to say. And so that was really, really dope. Now, I will tell you this. I did have one beef, and my beef a little bit with Steve Harvey was like, I think sometimes you got to understand everybody doesn't see the world through your lens, so you can't always come off so authoritative when you're putting out your opinion as if it's the law of the land. And he kept, I don't know why he had so much smoke for younger audiences. I'm like, sir, this may not necessarily be all of my era, but dang, like, I still have an appreciation for this kind of music. He kind of kept coming out like, if you were born after 1980, you just don't know good music. You don't know. I'm like, all right, you are killing the vibe. Like, this was kind of a night where people just really were just enjoying and celebrating. And just, the fact that you have these two groups that are still here with us, or the members that are still with us, God rest the souls to those that have passed on. But, and they're celebrating and, they're singing each other's songs. It was kind of dope towards the end when, they would gas each other up while they were performing. And, they started singing, September together. Stuff like that is really dope. And so why kill the energy by constantly going after different groups of people with what you got to beef with? I'm like, you're killing me. And I think there's also this misconception that just because people weren't around for a certain era of music, there's this perception that they must not have an appreciation for it. I'm like, that's very, very, very wrong in my opinion. And I say that because I think I can only speak for my era, but I think for a lot of people who grew up in the late 80s and through the 90s into the early 2000s, our experience was you had your favorite, well, in addition to whatever your parents already played when it was time to clean the house, when they start blasting that music, you knew it was time to clean up. You start hearing the Patty and Aretha and Anita and Ohio Players and whoever else. You knew, oh God, we got to clean up, man. But hearing those songs every weekend when it was time to deep clean, or hearing those songs in the car, that's part of our experience. But the other part was, having a song that you liked that was from your era, that was current, and then you discover that there's another song it samples. You go back and at some point you hear the original, and not only that, but you don't dismiss the original, but you're actually more, you become inquisitive about that song, and then you go discover that, and you end up liking that song as well. Or there was a movie that came out, or you saw a behind the music episode and you liked them, or there was some kind of special, because especially back then, BET used to always have all kind of little specials for different artists and everything. And so I've always felt like music is universal once you can get exposed to it. Like, I don't think people have a dislike for music that's not from their era. The problem might be the industry kind of teaches and conditions people to be dismissive of anything that comes out before their time, especially now in this era of social media and instant gratification. But at the same time, one of the things that I think is cool with this up and coming generation is you've seen something like TikTok pretty much create what you would call a reemergence of a lot of older material from decades before, where now you have like 13 and 14-year-olds that are singing songs from 40 years ago because they have a new dance to it or something. And and you've seen a lot of artists have their streams skyrocket because now younger audiences are finding it. And it just goes to show that people will always appreciate good music. It's just all about presentation, in my opinion. And it's about the fact that I just think it's a tacky way to kind of go and tear down other groups. If you want to be insightful, teach instead of tear down. That's only my thing, I guess. And it makes me think. I remember as a kid, I was like 9 or 10. I was obsessed with the song Atomic Dog for some reason. I just thought it sounded so cool. The production was just so funky and slick, and it didn't sound like... I was like, I don't know what to do with this, but I love it. But I didn't know who sang it. And so I remember I kept trying to ask my parents, who sings it? And, I tried to sing it to them, but, I'm horrible with lyrics already, so they didn't know what I was trying to sing. And so I remember for maybe a week and a half, I just went through all of their CDs, and they had hundreds. I never got a chance to go through the vinyls because that was too much work, but I literally went through every CD, put it in that big old stereo system in the living room, and just played song and skipped through song by song until I found what I thought was the song. And so while I was doing that, I'm discovering all of these other songs outside of Atomic Dog. It's like, okay, this is Cool in the Game, Hollywood Swinging. And I'm like, wait, this is like that Mace song I know. Oh, that's cool. And, you keep skipping it, okay. And you hear like Isley Brothers, Between the Sheets. And I think I already knew that one anyway. But like you start hearing all these songs from different eras, and Yarborough and Peoples, Don't Stop the Music. Because at the time, I knew Puff Daddy and Lil' Kim's Don't Stop What You're Doing. So I'm like, wait a minute, that's cool. And so by the time I got through that week of going through all their CDs, I had discovered so many songs from the earlier eras were sampled into stuff that I listened to at that moment. But it wasn't something where I was dismissive, like, oh, this sucks. It made me like actually just like that material as well. I think I talked about that as well in my R&B is Dead series, where I talked about like even the Brothers Johnson, I'll Be Good to You is one of my favorite songs. But my initial introduction was the remake, even though Quincy Jones did both of them, but the remake with Ray Charles and Shaka Khan and Quincy Jones, that's the one I grew up on because, that's the peak of the New Jack Swing era. I used to love that, and then one day I heard the original. I'm like, whoa, I love this one. And so, that's how music is. So it's kind of like, in that moment, because it's a night of celebration, let's keep the energy positive. That's all I'm saying. Like, don't kill the vibe of everybody. I was getting annoyed. Like, all right, Steve. And then he said some other trifling stuff too. I'm like, relax, man, relax. Anyway, the other thing, I did get a chance to see the Tina Turner documentary. I didn't get a chance to talk about it either, but it was a really good watch. It's actually really sad, though. It's very sad to watch, but it does make you appreciate her journey. The one request I did have, but again, I wasn't going to ask for more because I think they gave more than enough. I would have really loved to kind of hear and see more about her life after 2009. She did that final tour, and then she kind of went on and lived her life, because there's a lot that happened. Maybe not really great things, at least that part, because in the book, she has a second book that came out, I want to say around 2018, but she had a lot of health conditions take place where she needed like a new kidney. I think she had cancer, she had a stroke. Sadly, one of her sons passed. There was a lot of sad things that happened, but there were also some really good things. I would have loved to kind of see where she is now, but I do understand that people sometimes don't want to share everything, and sometimes things are just for them. Sometimes people want a piece of their life to just belong to them and not the world. And again, when you're a celebrity and you've already given your whole life to the world, who are we to ask for more? So I totally respect her in that plight. Then I got mad at myself because I'm like, dang, I should have went to that last tour because she toured in 2009. I remember she came to DC, but I didn't go because I was a broke college student, and at that point I'd already spent all my money seeing Janet. And then I saw Kanye's Glow in the Dark tour, and I think Maxwell was getting ready to go on tour, so I was trying to save up my few little dollars. And I had just saw Little Brother at Black Cat, even though their tickets were like $30. That's like one of my favorite rap groups. And so I didn't see Tina because I was like, oh, I know she says it's her last tour, but she said that the last 3 ones, so I'll catch her on the next one, acting like she wasn't 69, 70 then. Now, look, don't even get to see her, but it's okay. But after watching the documentary, like, for some reason, I kept playing the song Help. Like, they feature it in the documentary, and it's from, I can't remember what tour it is. I want to say it's the tour from '88. I don't know if it's that tour, but either way, it sounds amazing in the documentary. So I've been playing that song out. I'm like, I love that. And then I kind of went back and revisited some of her catalog, and it made me think, going back even to the conversation of younger audiences with older artists. I remember when she came out with the I Don't Really Want to Fight No More. I had to only be like first grade maybe. But I remember hearing that song and liking it, and it had nothing to do with age or anything. I wasn't thinking about her age because I was too little to understand all that anyway. When you're that age, things like sex appeal and marketing, that doesn't matter. If it sounds good to you, it sounds good to you. So I remember hearing that, and it just made me think back because somebody on Twitter had posted, what I found interesting. They just posted one of the video rotations on BET from the summer of 1994, because I've definitely said in the conversation of ageism, I think it's gotten worse in the last 20 years where the industry kind of tells audiences, artists are too old to appreciate. Pretty much in this industry, if you're over the age of 25 and you're not already established, you're going to have a hard time breaking into the pop world. The R&B world is a little bit more forgiving. You can be a little bit older and so on and so forth. But I was looking at just the roster of some of the videos that were being played. So this is from July 23rd, 1994 on BET. And so let me see some of the videos that were being played. Of course, The Brat, Funkified, Aaron Hall, I Miss You. But then look, Aretha Franklin, Willing to Forgive. Again, at this point, she was definitely in her 50s. There's some other ones on here. Angela Winbush, Inner City Blues. I think she was in her mid-40s at that point. Sounds of Blackness. You got Ann Nesby in the group, who at that point, I think she was in her late 50s. I'm scrolling. There's so many songs on here because they had some jams. Like Jodeci Feenan, A, Brand New Heavy's Dream On. CeCe Peniston, I'm Not Over You. There's a bunch of Tina Marie, Warm as My Mama's Oven. So it's like I'm looking, but they had a very good mix of both older artists that are seasoned and then newer artists and then established artists. And so it was kind of interesting to see because I remember as a child, I don't remember us being so pressed about the age of different artists or being dismissive. Like a lot of the legends were still out in the early 90s, and you would see them in the same rotation of some of the current acts. You don't really see that today because the industry's kind of changed. But again, that's why I say it's always great to kind of just introduce and teach music to people, or just let them, just be exposed. Because again, music has no timestamp. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If it's gonna connect with somebody, it's gonna connect. So overall, Verzuz was dope, and the Tina Turner documentary was really good. So definitely check it out when you get a chance. And like I've always said, celebrate these people while they're still with us, because you just never know what tomorrow brings. You don't want to get to the point where all you have left is just their legacies when you could have celebrated them while they were still here. Anyway, moving on. All right, now watch my energy shift here. Diddy. Sir, do you mind? Do you mind? Listen, I'll say this. I 100% agree with the sentiments that are being said, but of all people to deliver this message, sir, it had to be you. You decided this was you gonna lead the charge, huh? Okay, all right. Well, let's go into the material and then we'll chat. All right. So, Diddy has released a statement, and he's pretty much calling out corporate America for their trifling ways. And again, I 100% agree with the sentiments that are being said, but he released a statement through Revolt TV, which is his network. So let's read it, and then we'll chat, shall we? If you love us, pay us. A letter from Sean Combs to corporate America. All right, let's shake the table. All right? He even has a quote in here from Nobel Peace Prize winning Desmond Tutu. All right? If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. All right? Okay, here we go. The same feet these companies use to stand with us in solidarity are the same feet they use to stand on our necks. When confronted by the leaders of several black-owned media companies, General Motors listed my network, Revolt, as an example of the black-owned media it supports. While Revolt does receive advertising revenue from GM, Our relationship is not an example of success. Instead, Revolt, just like other black-owned media companies, fights for crumbs while GM makes billions of dollars every year from the black community. Exposing GM's historic refusal to fairly invest in black-owned media is not an assassination of character. It's exposing the way GM and many other advertisers have always treated us. No longer can corporate America manipulate our community into believing that incremental progress is acceptable action. This is kind of similar to the Byron Allen lawsuit with Comcast, by the way. Corporations like General Motors have exploited our culture, undermined our power, and excluded black entrepreneurs from participating in the value created by black consumers. In 2019, brands spent $239 billion on advertising. Less than 1% of that was invested in black-owned media companies. Out of the roughly $3 billion General Motors spent on advertising, we estimate only $10 million was invested in black-owned media. Call it out, that's right. Only $10 million out of the $3 billion. Like the rest of corporate America, General Motors is telling us to sit down, shut up, and be happy with what we get. The irony. It's disrespectful that black-owned media companies only represent 1% of the total advertising market. It's disrespectful that distributors refuse to carry black-owned media brands in an era where our impact and influence is undeniable. It is disrespectful that the same company that represents 14% of the population spends over $1.4 trillion annually is still the most economically undervalued and underserved at every level. Oh, I think I said company. I meant to say community. To repeat, $1.4 trillion annually. The almighty black dollar. We demand that corporate America reinvest an equitable percentage of what you take from our community back into our community. If the black community represents 15% of your revenue, black-owned media should receive at least 15% of your advertising on spending. I totally agree. The same way you understand the power of our dollars, we understand our power to take them away from any corporation that doesn't give us the economic inclusion we deserve. We are prepared to weaponize our dollars. If you love us, pay us. Not a token investment, not a charity check or donation. The time is now. Radical change is the only option. You're either with us or you are on the other side. I 100% agree and then some. However, Diddy, I just don't think you're the one that needs to deliver that message. I'm sorry. And it's just because you have too much smoke already associated with your name with how you handled business in the music industry. And for me, it looks like, okay, now because you don't have the same kind of monopoly on television that you had in music, now you feel some kind of way, and now you want to make this the whole revolutionary, let's bring the community out here to protest and march. Listen, I'm all about the march and the protest and calling these companies, to the table and saying, listen, y'all doing some stuff wrong, give us what is rightfully so. And Byron Allen, like I said, pretty much did that with Comcast when they weren't really trying to allow his networks and his stuff to be pretty much distributed through Comcast. We've seen that happen, but it's like, Diddy, you have so many artists. Like, let me just prove my point here. Like, if you just Google Bad Boy and you talk about just artists, half the time there's nothing but negative articles that pop up. If I go right now, I Google broke Bad Boy artists. All right, every article that pops up, 34 Bad Boy artists who have left the label, 12 former Bad Boy artists who are living in struggle. Bad Boy for life, the failed and short-lived careers of Bad Boy. Boom, the Diddy curse. 8 of the best artists formerly on Bad Boy Records. Former Bad Boy rapper Loon says he left Bad Boy Records because of whatever. Next one, don't sign with Diddy. A history of Bad Boy fails. Boom, the Bad Boy curse. Mace puts Diddy on blast. Says he attempted to buy back his publishing. Like, it's just like article after article. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. Black Rob calls out Diddy and former label. Bad Boy left me for, I guess it's dead or whatever. They had little dots after the article when it's too long. Puff Daddy, Bad Boy or Bad Boy CEO. Like, it's just article after article. 50 Cent on Bad Boy artist. Nobody survived. Okay? It's just like, goodness. It's, sir, you got to do right by the people that have been under you first. You know what I mean? And it's like, even with Mace. Mace literally just called this man out a few months ago because, Mace was trying to buy back his publishing, for $2 million. And of course, Diddy was right in the mix, like, slowing down the progress. And so if you follow a lot of what has happened with Bad Boy artists, one of the things is a lot of the artists had some really, 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 really crappy deals. And a lot of the times it meant that they also did not get their publishing. Publishing is probably the most important thing in the music industry because that's how you get paid years after, okay? The publishing is the money you make after the fact. A lot of times when you get whatever record deal you get, you're gonna get some upfront money after you paid back everything that's owed to the label, after you've gotten your advance, after you've, after your record has come out and made some money, and all of the advancements that were placed for marketing and A&R and distribution and music videos and promo and wardrobe and makeup and choreographers and dancers and producers and stuff. After all of that has been paid, then you finally get your check. But afterwards, the publishing, meaning that when they use your music and material for commercials or movies or ads or anything like that, you get a certain percentage. A lot of times Diddy kept that from many of the different artists. Like, I just literally watched the Breakfast Club interview with Kelly Price, and she was like, that was the main reason why I wasn't signing with Bad Boy, because he wanted to keep my publishing. And mind you, as Kelly Price, she wrote all of her stuff. So it's like, what publishing you gonna get and you didn't write nothing? And so you even see that in television. A lot of times when a show gets sold into syndication, or when a show ends, the actors in the show get a choice. You can get the big check up front, or you can get the residuals, which is pretty much publishing. And so if you remember the actress that played Thelma on Good Times, that's how she said she stayed afloat after Good Times ended. She didn't take the lump sum payout. She took the residual income of the publishing that came. And so she's still making money from, a show that was on 40 years ago. And so sadly, when you talk about somebody like a Diddy, there are a lot of artists who just, they got screwed over. They got some really bad contracts, and a lot of them are broke. They have no money. And you have this man who's pretty much a billionaire, and and is still holding on to some of these contracts that he will not let go of. And so you have artists that are struggling, artists who are pretty much just left destitute. And then you got the nerve to come out here and want to go and lead the pilgrimage for what black businesses and stuff need from these corporations and why they got to stop screwing over people. Sir, you are the corporation. No disrespect. We respect everything that happened with Bad Boy, and Bad Boy is the soundtrack to many lives of people who grew up in a certain era. But there are a lot of artists who struggled under your watch. And again, some of this is also just music business, because again, Bad Boy was not solely a label on its own. It still had a parent company. I think the parent company was Sony. And so, when an artist makes whatever money for the label, Sony's getting the first cut, all right? And then it goes to Bad Boy, and then within Bad Boy, whoever's up top, it works down its way to the artist. Similar with like TLC when they were broke. It was Arista up at the top, then it was LaFace, and then they were under Pebble, so Pebbletone got the check next, so it's already went down 3 layers. Then it went to the lawyers and the producers and the songwriters and everybody else, and then also whatever else was left in advancement that wasn't paid, and then TLC got their money, so they all got $50,000 a year for 2 years in a row. You know what I mean? And so similar setup. And so it's just like, sir, no. Even when we watched your documentary about the Bad Boy reunion tour, you had some artists that didn't even want to go on it because they're like, no, you still owe me money. Okay, like rest in peace to Craig Mack, but it's just like, come on, man. I 100% agree, but it's just like, you probably shouldn't be the person leading the argument. It's kind of like sometimes, long story short, everybody don't got to be serving the food. Sometimes you got that person that be scratching all the time, but they want to be the first one to fix somebody's plate. No, we good over here, okay? It's just, I 100% agree. Like, I guess I'd feel better about this if Diddy somehow made right with all of the artists that have struggled under him. And, he paid whatever debt was owed to these artists, or at least gave them their publishing, or, a percentage of their royalties, or at least their masters, something. Then you can come back and make this argument. Once you kind of clean the table that you already left dirty. You just can't tear up one table and then jump to the next one and then want to demand things when they're doing exactly what you did to other people, but just in the television world as opposed to in music. Like, come on, man. Like, man. I was like, of all people, like, we watched you have a bunch of starving artists who just wanted to be hungry and get into the game. We watched you make them walk all the way to Brooklyn for some cheesecake. That ain't had nothing to do with music. That was all ego. Just for you to break the group up after one album. The band has sold 1.5 million copies, but that ain't good enough. So we gonna make them work harder. And then they didn't meet your standards, so I'm gonna dismantle the band, and the only two that's gonna stay is gonna be Ness, it's gonna be Babs. Give it up for the next Bonnie and Clyde of hip hop. And we ain't seen them since, because you didn't do nothing with them. Same thing with Danity Kane. You watched this girl group that had a chance to really blow up and be something. Ego got in the way. You kicked the Aubrey girl out the group, and then D Woods felt some kind of way. Oh, you could leave too. What? And so it's just like, man, and I'll always remember with Danity Kane, I remember them going on the Miss Jones show when their second album came out. And they're like, yeah, we didn't make no money off the first album, so hopefully we make some from this one. I'm just like, dang. And again, it's not just Diddy. The whole music industry is shady like that. There's a really good YouTube channel, by the way. Let me find it really quick. It is called, what's it called? Music Money Makeover Show. For those who are really like into the conversation of music and like the business and the conversation of royalties and residuals and stuff like that, that's a really great channel to check out. But again, it's just like, you gotta be kidding me, Diddy. Like, and he's not lying. That's the other part. Everything that is stated in there is 100% correct. When you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at how these corporate companies are screwing over black media, black anything, but then again, latching on to our imaging, latching on to our culture, our music, everything that we do that the whole world studies, but then not giving us what is old, not giving opportunities, and not even opportunities, but giving what is old. Not, creating a platform where actually, take that back. I don't even need y'all to create a platform because we've already been making it. People just need the investors. That's really the conversation. And so, again, watching these corporations play these games in our face, he's absolutely right. But it's just like, sir, you got so much smoke already going on with you. You don't get to be the one to lead this charge. Let somebody else have the conversation, because really, if all of these artists start coming out in droves about everything you've done, it's not going to look good. And it kills the argument. It kills the progress, because now these companies can say everything that I just said and say as a defense mechanism against what was just stated against them. It's just like, man, you got too much smoke, okay? It's kind of like when you go in one of them houses, like, real talk. Every time I used to visit my grandma in Savannah, there was this older couple we used to have to go say hi to that lived across the street, the Browns. And so the inside of their house was exactly how it was back in the 70s. They hadn't changed any furniture other than like the TV and maybe the microwave. And so they had the same couches, same everything, same paint on the walls. The problem was they smoked cigarettes like nobody's business, especially the husband. He used to stay pulling some nicotine. I mean, like, the cigarette be this long. All of this right here was ash that he didn't button to the tray. And so years and years of smoking in the house, the walls would be stained with like the smoke. Same thing, Diddy. That's kind of like how we're looking at you right now in this conversation. Like, yeah, you're making a point, and you're not lying. And again, this is so much bigger than just Revolt TV. Because hello, Aspire TV, they're going through the exact same thing. TV One goes through it. BET has a little bit more funding, but they're in the same boat. Like, a lot of these networks are dealing with that. But it's just like, man, I would just prefer he does right by all the artists he screwed over first. Then you can come out here when you have a clean slate. Like, you got too much on your slate, man. Come on. Or at least let somebody else, you can give the message, just let somebody else be the messenger. That's what's messing it up. The messenger has killed this entire argument, which again, everything that's being stated is 100% correct. That's why you had that big Comcast lawsuit with Byron Allen. And so it's just like, man. But GM, y'all also tried it too, by the way. Don't be trying to, they will stay throwing something that we got. Oh yeah, we got a great relationship with them and you ain't talked to them in 20 years. Like, get out of here. Boy, Diddy. Moving on.
It is significant that I'm the fourth African-American head coach in any sport in the history of the University of North Carolina. I'm very proud to be African-American, but I'm also very proud that my wife is white. And I'm very proud that my three beautiful, unbelievable kids are a combination of both of us.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Thank you. Like, what was the reason? We didn't ask. But let me tell you what that comes off to me as. To me, that comes off as signaling. And I see that as signaling to pretty much white America, the media, those up top, anybody who has any kind of fear of things that are too black, just letting them know I'm one of the safe ones. I'm one of the good ones. You don't have to worry about me because I'm just happy to be in the room. Yes, I'm proud to be the first African-American, so on and so forth, but I'm also proud that my wife is white. I'm just like, what correlation does that have? And so for me, the only correlation that has is letting people know that you're safe. And because, again, this is that conversation of the climb up. Remember how I've been saying for the past few months, pay attention to black faces that end up in high spaces. A lot of times, the higher they climb up, the more they become about themselves and less about the collective, or the more they become about maintaining a status quo or getting into good graces with other positions and people that get them into more elements of prosperity, usually sometimes at the expense of their own collective. And so you start to see that. I can't say that is the experience for him, but I'm seeing that beginning trail. At least that's what I'm starting to see. And so it's just like, interesting. And it's not even about the conversation of who he's married to. Who cares? Do you, at this point in age, you're going to marry who you marry, you're going to love who you're going to love. Life is life. It is what it is. Live it, and then you move on into whatever's next after life. And so, but again, just watching this man have to dilute his own blackness while he can't even stand in his own accomplishment. That's the issue. You're being celebrated for this accomplishment, and you can't even stand in it. Because there's that much fear of being associated with black people collectively or being associated or deemed too black. So you have to dilute everything and filter your image down by letting people know, hey, well, my wife is white. He was also letting people know ahead of time. Before y'all start trying to Google me, come after me, I'm letting y'all know right now, this is her. So what's up? And so it's just like, all right. And that's just one of the things that you tend to see. And what I find interesting, of course, in that world of college sports, it's one of the things I would never want to do, because like I feel like college coaches get fired after one bad season. You know, they stay firing football and basketball coaches when they have one bad season. If this man has one bad season, you already know his next move is going to be, oh, come stand with me, black people. This is a community effort. They're trying to stop me because I'm black, and we got to come together and everything else. And it's like, all right, you know, that same energy folks had for Omarosa, because Omarosa did that same foolery where she jumped into that Trump administration and played those silly games and was all on The View talking trash. And, we're currently working on the African American History Month program. I was like, African American History Month program? Okay, well, what is it going to be? And then that same day, that's when the former president made that tweet. I'm going to send the National Guard to Chicago. It's just out of control over there. I'm like, oh, is that the program? But then after she gets fired, then she switches it all up and, oh, my people. Nah, you stay on over there with that foolery that you jumped into. Don't be trying to bring us back into nothing, please. I had no idea it was that bad, y'all. Yes, you did. You'd have known this man for almost 20 years. Don't be playing these games with us. But, it's just like, sir, if you live your life and be happy. And it has nothing to do with him being proud of his wife, because he could have easily done his speech and said, yeah, I'm proud to be the first so-and-so, and I'm proud of my wife and our beautiful family and that she stood by me. But, again, the emphasis on letting everybody know that she's white. Because I'm telling you this right now. If everybody in that room were black and that wasn't something that was airing to all of America and only black people were going to see it, he wasn't going to announce that she was white. He was only doing that because he knows that white people are watching. And again, being deemed one of the safe ones helps to open more doors. Because when you're talking about just the racist structure in America, we already know, like, white Americans like us sprinkled into these positions. They don't like too many of us in this, because then it feels like we're going to take it over. Okay? You can even look at some of the commentary that's been happening with the TV show This Is Us. A lot of white America hates the show right now because they think it's too black now. They finally given the Randall character and his family a lot more airtime and storylines, and people don't like it. This is too much. This is too much. We liked it more when it was just him and the white siblings and the white adoptive parents, and sometimes they would showcase the family. We liked it then because that was just the right amount of blackness that we could digest. Now it's too black. It's too urban. You have Felicia Rashad in there. You got that boy from the Central Park 5 in there. There's too much going on. This is just, I don't know. They're talking about COVID and they're talking about police brutality. It's too much. Same kind of thing. Like, they would rather have us just be, the sprinkle or the speck of pepper in a bowl of salt, because, in that realm you can keep an eye on everything. And even if there's a whole lot going on, you stir up that bowl of salt and you can't find the pepper, that's fine, because they assimilated into what was the status quo anyway. But when you start sprinkling too much pepper in that bowl of salt and then you start stirring and you can't hide the pepper anymore, and that blackness starts to pop out, that starts to bring out questions and conversations about things that may not necessarily be fair or equitable or anything like that. Oh no, too much. Hot mess. This is reminding me of 90 Day Fiance. This is so left field, but remember, like, I was obsessed with the show when the pandemic started, and I told y'all, Baby Girl Lisa and Soulja Boy, that was my storyline to follow. That was the older white woman who went to Nigeria to marry that younger guy that was like 30, and he was a rapper. And so he has the whole launch party for his music video, and the song is dedicated to Baby Girl Lisa, who was the fiance, mind you. Baby Girl Lisa is nobody's baby girl, because she at least got to be about 55, 56. And so he does this whole speech, and all of his fans are at the party. The women are in there because he has a lot of women fans who just love him and everything. And he does this speech, I'd like to also thank my fiance, Baby Girl Lisa, who is here. Beautiful white woman who has come all the way from America. And everybody in the party was just like, what? This is that same energy to me. Like, sir, good luck, but we'll see how this unfolds. And then as far as this Derrick Chauvin trial, I'm not going to lie, I haven't watched a lot of it just for the sake of my sanity. It's too much for me. But it's interesting, you're watching the defense throw anything at a wall at this point, because I just think there's so much evidence against this officer. But then again, we know where we live and you don't want to get your hopes up. But what I'm seeing at this point is they're now going like the George Zimmerman route, or even the Casey Anthony route, where it's at this point, let's latch onto any technicality that we can find, and that's how we'll get the man off, because there's too many things going on. And when you watch all of the approaches that the defenses use, like, I feel like these tactics would have worked 20 years ago before the emergence of social media, but with what we saw in relation to everything that happened to George Floyd. There's entirely too much evidence that's out there in the open. You can't get away with the same shenanigans that you've gotten away with before. And so they've used everything in their power. This has really become the persecution of George Floyd. In all honesty, you know, they've put heavy emphasis on the drug usage, and they've tried to use that argument. Well, he was already high. He was on, you know, this, that, and the third. They put so much emphasis on this $20 bill because somehow this $20 bill would make it justifiable why he's dead, or even the fact that he may have been on drugs somehow makes it justifiable that he's dead. And, you know, they want to know how much fentanyl was in his system and why he was already dying. They've latched onto that. They've latched onto the argument that the crowd was too rowdy and he was nervous then and he kind of was freezing up, and even they were a threat. And I'm like, okay, if that was the case, you would have dispersed the crowd if they were so dangerous. And so they've tried to latch onto that. And, you know, he was just stressed out about what was happening with the crowd, and that's why Derrick Chauvin did what he had to do. And then the conversation of, oh, George Floyd was already dying. You know, he was already halfway dead. It wasn't even really the knee on the neck. He was just already dead. You know, he was dying to begin with. It was his last moments anyway. He was going to drop dead once he left the store. You know, they pushed the conversation of, you know, Derrick Chauvin, he didn't have to stop and try to administer CPR. And they made this comparison where they're like, well, you know, if you were in a shootout, because of course that's the next thing. Let's create the hypothetical situation that you think you can associate black people with and put it into a hypothetical scenario and piece it together. You know, if you were in a shootout and you shoot the person, would you stop and administer aid, or do you wait until the threat is gone? And I'm like, but we're not going to equate somebody being in a shootout with somebody who's on the ground, cuffed, and no longer moving. Those are not interchangeable. You tried it. And then even the conversation of, you know, even if he were to gain consciousness, we don't know if he's going to reach for the gun or attack. I'm like, here we go again, because now all of a sudden we're all black men that are in any kind of element of distress after pretty much halfway being killed by police. We're going to wake up like monsters and beasts and just be in attack mode. Rah! You know, same kind of narrative they use with Mike Brown after, you know, you saw the testimony and they're like, oh yeah, we shot him and he just kept coming. Even though his hands were up, he just kept coming. Rah! Like, this is the crap that they like to try and do. And what's interesting this time is that you're watching all of these police pretty much turn the tables and throw Derrick Chauvin under the bus. And I think that's because they recognize there's nothing they can do for him. There's just entirely too much evidence. You have an entire video. You've had literally the entire world uprise in relation to this. And so at this point, those police are now protecting their own as far as that entire status quo in relation to that department. That's what that's about. Making sure that, you know, in the event that Derrick Chauvin catches, you know, all the smoke or whatever may come to him, that it doesn't also come to that police department. So let's at this point just disassociate ourselves, because we can't save him. He's on his own at this point. And so now they're latching onto the, oh, well, you know, this was too much force. This is not how we train. This was not in alignment with the way that we do things. And I'm like, this is still an officer that had complaint after complaint after complaint after complaint, and he was still on the force and everything else like that. And it's not even just him. You still have those other 3 officers standing right there not helping as well. So clearly it ain't just Derrick, because if that's the case, if he was out of compliance with what y'all had all trained on, why didn't the other 3 step in and say, wait a minute, you're doing too much? None of that. And so you have paramedics coming on here and first responders talking about how terrible the whole scene is. It's a whole lot. And so it's interesting. The police are trying to cover for themselves now. So yeah, they'll let Derrick Chauvin be the example. Yeah, because, you know, if you can make an example out of Derrick Chauvin, they can continue to do what they've already been doing. That's exactly what that's about. So I'm not even going to jump out here and start throwing a parade for the police officers who are saying, yeah, that doesn't align. And even now that you're seeing, okay, they were actually on the man's neck for 9 minutes, and then you just had the doctor saying, you know, he pretty much was going after 3 minutes and 27 seconds. It was a wrap then, and then so those other 6 minutes weren't even necessary because he wasn't coming back from that. And so in my opinion, he was already dead on the sidewalk. They want to keep pushing the narrative that he died in the hospital. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, you might have pronounced him dead there, but he was gone. And so we'll see where this goes. It's crazy because you can't even get your hopes up because you know what country you live in. We've seen this so many times, but you know, I will say, y'all not convict this man if you want to. It'd be round 2 of everything you saw in spring of 2020 for a lot of folks, and it's just like, man, it's a lot. And for George Floyd's family to have to sit here and witness this every day and then watch this raggedy defense try and just tear this man's character down every chance they get, when in reality he's the one who's no longer with us. You know, you got to really be an evil person to still somehow find your ways to justify the wrongdoing of the officer by putting everything on the person who's no longer even breathing. You know, even with the whole audio bit where I think the defense were trying to say, oh yeah, we have him on tape saying I ate too many drugs. Nobody says I ate too many drugs, and it turns out, he says I didn't do any drugs, I didn't take any drugs, something like that. I forgot what it was saying. But, again, they're latching onto every little racist stereotype, you can throw out there to try to, again, instill fear. Because, again, there's a lot of white people in that jury, and there's enough of them to buy into that. That's what makes me nervous about that jury, because even if he's not convicted, you can definitely still get that hung jury. I can see that happening too. And so it's just like, we'll see where this goes. But, man, this has been a stressful case to follow. So to anybody who's been able to sit through it each and every day, I will add you to my prayer list, because the way I had to drink my little tea and play the sounds of the rainforest, soundtrack to just after all that, because I want to fight that defense attorney. I'm like, you just out here doing anything. And then even with him, he's, in my opinion, he's not even a good attorney, to be honest. I think that in itself is another conversation around privilege. I'm like, you are on probably the biggest case in the last 5 years, and the entire world is watching, and you have a horrible case. And I'm not trying to gas him up or encourage him to do better, but I'm just like, dang, you were the best they had to offer? That's why I'm saying if this man gets off, it's going to be insulting. Like, we've literally watched this disaster on live TV each and every day. Like, get out of here. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, moving on. And then I did want to close with DMX. Overall, the entire situation is been very draining to follow, mainly because you have so many that are so pressed to be the first to try to break news, as if you get something for delivering terrible information to the masses. You know what I mean? And so as of right now, he is still with us, but there have already been reports that the man has died, and people, of course, latched onto it, and we're already doing the airbrush photos, and everybody's trying to be the first with the exclusive, and you've watched publications have to retract their stories. And it's just like, I need us to get into a space and recognize that this is still somebody's father, this is still somebody's husband or fiance or son, or this is somebody's life. This is somebody who has a family. And I think in this world of social media where everything is all about instant gratification, I think sometimes people forget that, and they're so pressed to want to be the first with scoop that they'll do, anything by any means at the expense of anybody and everybody's well-being, their feelings, or even just how they feel. And it's a very draining and stressful experience if you have a family member that is on life support, and then you may not have had an opportunity to communicate with everybody who may be at the hospital, because again, we're still in the COVID era, so hospitals aren't letting whole families into the rooms or into the spaces anymore. And so I'm sure this man has family members who are getting their information from other family members, but before they can get through, or before somebody can answer the phone call, they look on Twitter and Rip DMX is trending for a third or fourth time in 2 days. Like, come on. So it's just like horrible. It's kind of like even when Kobe passed, and you have the family finding out through television and through social media, because it hasn't even got to them. Like, I'm always like, listen, let the family or somebody that reps DMX make that official statement if that time has come. But in the meantime, let the families have their way of processing things. Everybody always wants to be the first in line for something. Like, goodness. And in relation to DMX, I think the other piece that was killing me is just sometimes even the judgment that comes out. You know what I mean? You've seen people come out and do all these think pieces about drugs, and this is why y'all got to take care of yourselves and say no to drugs, folks. And it's like, no, all y'all can be quiet. And I say that because, again, this past year has not been a normal year for most of us. So people who may have already had whatever baggage they had before March of 2020 had to deal with that on top of living in the world during a pandemic and living in an economy that's crashing. And a lot of people have really gone through a lot and lost their minds, or things have happened, because again, these are not normal times. And then again, you take into account, you've finally seen just the ugly side of racism really just jump out and be just in the forefront, and it's just out there in your face. There's a lot of things that people are dealing with, and so people have sadly had to find ways to cope with whatever was happening. People have lost family members and jobs and their livelihood, and here we are trying to be Twitter disciples and tell everybody about themselves and their lives and want to be judgmental. And it's like, I need us to not do that. And when you look at somebody like DMX and you see his story, you understand that he's come from a place of hurt. And it's not saying, that just because he's dealt with what he's dealt with, all of a sudden he's gonna somehow be able to just overcome it all because he's a celebrity and he has money. No, he's just like everybody else. And so I was very disappointed to see, like, even some of the publications. I saw one, I think it was New York Post, which is pretty much trash anyway most of the time, posting an article about him losing different properties and his money problems. I'm like, see, this is stuff I'm talking about. Like, y'all love to tear down people even when they're already down. Like, and then after the fact, when they sadly transition on, then you want to repaint their image and paint them to be the greatest. They did that with Whitney Houston. She was a crackhead every day of the week. And then it's interesting because somebody like Whitney Houston, she was painted to be the crackhead, and the Bobby Brown jokes, this, that, and the third. Meanwhile, half the entertainers gas up rapping about, Percocets and everything else all day. Then after Whitney dies, now all of a sudden you want to paint her to be, oh, she was the greatest and we just loved her, and if she just could have got herself together. Well, y'all was kicking her while she was down. And then you force her to go on a tour and you boot a woman every single night and tell her she couldn't entertain a dead rat and keep dragging her along from venue to venue, knowing she wasn't comfortable singing in front of audiences at that point in time. And, again, the money started talking and people were critical. I hate to say it, but I'm grateful that her last tour didn't make it to the United States because, oh, God, people would have been horrible. But, it's just like, I don't know, people got to do better. But, condolences to anybody who's been affected by any kind of hardship in the moment. And again, I guess, prayers or well wishes to just DMX's family and what they're dealing with. That's hard, to have your relative on life support, and it's being reported that he's in a vegetative state, and it's a lot. And so I just think people got to understand, respect the plight of these people's families, because to you it's just a tweet or an article or an Instagram post, but this is somebody's family. This is somebody jumping into their new normal where they have to live a life without somebody that's been a part of it for most of their existence. So that's all. I hate that this had to be so somber, but that's a lot. It's like literally as I was doing this video and I was doing this segment, and I think I'm gonna say it was on the P Diddy part, I kept getting the notifications like, oh, DMX is no longer with us, and then I went to go check and it's like, oh no, he's still here, and then, oh, okay, they retracted this. I'm like, that's draining to follow, especially for the family and for their friends and stuff. So it is what it is. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Right. I can read your face. He's taking her everything. He's taking her everything. And it goes just to show, even slow, it's not right. The mind's critical. 'Cause with all she's got, do I wanna be a troubled remedy?